Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Karitis. Today is Wednesday, April 8th, 2020. Thank you so much for joining me. Title of today's podcast is Free Was Never So Expensive. And of course, we're going to highlight a lot of this fiscal and monetary quote-unquote stimulus bailout package, fraud, corruption, good old boys club, whatever you want to call it. Free was never so expensive. But before we get into that, some market performance, what Washington, D.C. wants to continue to do already, which we've discussed this, no surprise. I just want to let the audience know that despite the technical difficulties that we've had uploading some of our podcasts on our website, it appears that technical glitch has been resolved and we are able to get our podcast up and running back on the capitalnews.com. Of course, the website was still up and running just fine. The videos still work. The articles could be accessed, all that good jazz. It was just an issue with the podcast that has since been resolved, thank goodness. And you are now free to go back to the capitalnews.com to listen to our podcast if you wish, or stay on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening to. But I did want to let you know that option is once again available to you. And of course, the articles are there. Most recently, the representation and recourse article, which I again stress that you take the time to read, that you use it as your own, keep my name on it, whatever you want to do. Send it to your congressmen, send it to your senators, wake them up, say enough is enough, because it's going to keep coming. They are not going to stop this. This is a runaway train. It is out of control. The inmates are running the asylum. This has already been true, but now they are completely off their medication, and there are just no more guards in the system. There are no more guards watching or monitoring the asylum. They've been completely taken over, okay? There's only a few of us left. So please, get in contact with your congressman, get in contact with your senators, send them an email, send them a letter, give them a phone call, go see them, whatever you got to do to tell them that this is out of control and it has to stop. You want the talking points? You have them in my letter representation in recourse. One after the other. Boom, 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 boom. All of this nonsense, all of this madness, all of this insanity started well before the onset of COVID-19, which of course is just a very, very, very convenient excuse to blame it on a global pandemic, to justify everything that they have done for the past decade, much longer than that, but really in hyperdrive, overdrive, as we like to say here, for the past decade, with their asinine and corrupt, immoral, unethical economic experiment of extremely low interest rates, of quantitative easing, negative interest rates, debt monetization, of everything, the whole gamut. Huge deficit spending, at least here in the United States. And it's only going to get worse. That's why the title of today's podcast is Free Was Never So Expensive. I mean, you think you're getting a check, woohoo, $1,200. It's sit down and shut up money. Make no mistake about it. Because if this has just been a plain Jane, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, type of bailout that we're used to from a decade ago during the great financial crisis, pitchforks and torches would be in the streets already. Can't do that, right? Can't have that nonsense, although I think it's virtually inevitable. No, we have to give the little people something this time. Yeah, we're still going to give trillions to you fat cats on Wall Street and major corporations in corporate America who squandered their resources, financial engineering after financial engineering, paid themselves handsomely, didn't have cash reserves, now coming on bended knee to Washington, D.C., meaning you and me, the taxpayer, to bail them to trillions of dollars directly from the Federal Reserve. They don't care. They're accountable to nobody. And talk about inmates running the asylum. You have the two idiots, the former chairman of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke, and Janet Yellen coming out, and they're starting to talk, around the edges of allowing and giving the Federal Reserve the authority. Of course, this would have to be through Congress, giving the Federal Reserve the authority to buy stocks outright. And of course, there are a couple central banks around the world that are allowed to do this. the Bank of Japan, which has been doing this for a long time, they buy Japanese ETFs to buy the broader market. And if you look at a long-term chart of the Nikkei, the Japanese stock market, the major index, they haven't come close to regaining where they were back in the late 1980s, early 1990s. Not even close. Not even close. Despite the fact that you have a central bank with its own printing press buying up shares. Still hasn't regained its all-time highs from 30 years ago. Swiss National Bank, they can buy them, they can do the same thing. But not here, not in the United States. Of course, there are people who speculate the Fed's already doing it, or at least through, a middleman. And of course, that could be true. There's no audit, and even if there was an audit, they would pass it with flying colors. Oh, of course, every dollar accounted for. Everything they're doing is fantastic. They did it to save the economy. They could make no mistakes. And of course, Bernanke and Yellen, well, nobody can oversee, nobody can overrule what the Federal Reserve does, which was also pointed out by Alan Greenspan years ago as well, who was also a former chairman of the Federal Reserve. Again, ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand the system that we are supposed to have in this country, a system built on checks and balances. It's not even a question of backroom deals anymore. This is in your face. The curtain has been removed. Toto moved the curtain. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. No, look at him. He's there. And he's not even having his back turned to you anymore. He is looking you straight in the eye, saying you're screwed and there's nothing you're going to do about it. We're going to give all this money to major corporations. We're going to give all this money to bail out central banks. We're going to give all this money to bail out states. We're going to give all this money to bail out pensions. We're going to give all this money to bail out Wall Street. One after the other. And all you're going to get, if you're lucky, is $1,200. Good luck. Have fun. Good luck. Free was never so expensive, folks. The price tag on this is still racking up as we speak. Already in a country here in the United States that was going to be facing at least a $1 trillion deficit this year, probably $1.5 trillion. Now it's going to be $2, $3, $4 trillion by the time this thing is all said and done. And that's just this year. This will continue into next year because, ladies and gentlemen, this is not going to be your V-shaped recovery. We've been down this path many, many times before. Now, I don't know what's going to happen in the stock market. I know what should happen in the stock market, but what should happen and what will happen are two different things a lot of the time. And that's not how you play it. You got to play the market that you have, not the one that you want. So you have to be extremely vigilant and careful when you're out there in these markets because they are completely disconnected from the underlying economy. Now, they attempted to get a little bit closer, but of course, that's what we're talking about. Free was never so expensive. Markets aren't allowed to go down. They can only go up, right? This isn't free market capitalism. This is socialism, which is a good segue to our buddy Bernie, as you know, suspended his campaign. So Bernie's out. Maybe he's happy. Maybe that's why he's not running. Maybe that's why he's out. Because, well, if I was in there, it'd be bailouts for everybody. Well, hey, that's what we already got. So this is ridiculous because the markets took off today on some other stuff and off of this news, probably to some headline news. But of course, all of the money printing and the liquidity injections that continue into the markets across the board. I mean, I don't get it. Wall Street, maybe that was the case, maybe it wasn't. But nevertheless, the markets did rally off of the back of that news that Bernie Sanders was suspending his campaign. I mean, what are you saying here, Wall Street, that you don't like socialism? Well, that's a crock of you-know-what. It's a big bowl of BS. They love socialism. Look at what they're getting. They're getting nothing but bailouts right now. They're getting everybody's money. They get it from the fees they collect when things are good. They get it when things are falling apart. They can't lose. They love socialism. This isn't a free market capitalistic system in this country. It's not even close. It's been long gone. Long gone. It's just a question of corporate socialism or, I guess, democratic socialism. I guess that would be people's socialism. So it would be even more checks to the people, to the average Joe. I don't know where that money is going to come from because if it's supposed to come from the taxpayer, well, the taxpayer, most people aren't working right now. And we're going to get those numbers out tomorrow to see how many filed for initial claims last week. That number will come out tomorrow. Of course, we're already at 10 million over the past 2 weeks. I imagine it's going to be another doozy. What will the markets do? Is this a good news is good news cycle? Is this a good news is bad news? Bad news is good news? Buy. I mean, what type of cycle are we in here once again? If it's really bad again, is it going to say, oh, well, the Federal Reserve, they're going to have to go to negative interest rates. They're going to have to print even more money. They're going to have to buy more investment-grade bonds. They're going to have to buy commercial real estate. I mean, now Congress is going to have to come and approve them to buy stocks. Look, this is crackhead behavior. Only a crackhead would come up with this logic. This is what we're witnessing. These are the people at the helm. This isn't a question of being a Republican or a Democrat. Whether you love Trump or you hate him, whether you love Bernie or you hated him, it is a joke all around. Every one of them a clown. There is no leadership. You don't know who to believe, who to trust. There is no credibility. The hits just keep on coming. And it's going to be you and me that's going to have to pay the bill once again. And this one is going to be paid with a doozy. A doozy. Hyperinflation. We are going to become, if we're not already, a banana republic. Because I'm sure I could come up and put it to paper and come up with a very strong argument that we're already there. Perhaps that we've been there already in this banana republic. There's no accountability. All the way at the top. The buck stops here, Mr. President. No. This special inspector general who's supposed to overlook all of this massive stimulus bailout money. No, they're not going to do it. No, we're not going to have that. No, we can't have that. So Trump's already ruled down that one. So all that money is not going to be accounted for. Fantastic. From a man who has bankrupted casinos and many, many other businesses. Good. Great policy. Good. That's what we want. No accountability, no oversight. And then given another $400 or $500 billion to the Federal Reserve, which they can multiply by a factor of 9 to 10 times over. So we've just given them $4 to $5 trillion to go play with, to go buy up all of the assets in the world. Oh, that's fantastic. So when you're making a payment, guess who you're paying directly now? Follow the money. One of the top 10 rules of the cynical investor in our book, The Cynic's Guide to Investing. Follow the money. Just like asking and answering the question, who benefits, which we ask here all the time. And it was part of our podcast the other day's title, Oil and War. Who benefits? Right? And we're supposed to have that meeting coming up with OPEC Plus. What's the United States going to do? Are we going to cut production too? Are we going to go to these meetings and have conversations? So what does that mean? Are we becoming a cartel? Are we working with the cartel? Is that how this works? Meanwhile, the other day, you have William Barr, you have Secretary of Defense Esper, Donald Trump, all out there before the COVID-19 response, daily briefing. We have to go fight the drug cartels. Well, we're going to fight those cartels, but we're going to go join the oil cartel. This is fantastic. Fantastic. We got to cut production. We got to get those prices up. When nobody's working, when nobody has money, airlines are suffering. You'd think maybe they would want lower oil fuel costs. No, we can't have that because we have this other sector. We have this other industry here in the United States, which has also been on a debt binge called the energy sector. Where there was an article in Bloomberg just the other day that claimed that 30 to 40% of energy companies in the United States could default, could go bust if oil prices remain below $30 a barrel. Okay? On the supply-demand function, as far as I'm concerned, they are going to remain below that. I don't care what type of production cuts they come up with, doesn't matter. That's how weak the demand side of this is. All right? So it's going to take a geopolitical event. And it's going to have to be a big one. And the only one that could be big enough to sustain higher oil prices would be, you guessed it, war. Because we've seen attempts at supply shocks. We've seen Saudi oil fields get hit. We've seen oil tankers get bombed. We've seen drones get shot down. We've seen an Iranian general get killed. We've seen the Iranians attack U.S. bases and Iraqi bases in Iraq. Yeah, oil shoots up, and then what happens? It comes back down. Oh, by the way, this was all before COVID-19. Don't forget. Okay? All before COVID-19 really became this global pandemic that it is today. Oil prices spiked, and they came right back down. Why? Because the global economy was weakening and has been weakening for quite some time. All right? So the only thing that's going to get this market, the oil market, up and to stay up, unfortunately, is going to be war. And we already told you where some of the U.S. military assets, primarily through the Navy, are already stationed. They're circling Venezuela. They're circling Iran. It's just a matter of time before something erupts. I hope 100% that I am wrong. This podcast is about peace and prosperity, free market capitalism, and our constitutional republic. That's what this is about. I don't want war, but that's what happens. That's what history tells us is most likely coming. It's a pattern. We keep repeating it. When all else fails, take them to war. That's where we're headed. You know, I think there's a lot, there's no question there is. Of course, we don't know because, we're not flies on the wall. We're not in these meetings. We're not the decision makers. And of course, they're not going to come out and tell us the whole truth. There's a ton of geopolitical gamesmanship being played right now, a lot of strategy taking place. I think the U.S. dollar is under a lot of stress. I think it's under a threat. I still think, obviously, with all of the U.S. dollar-denominated debt that is in existence and coming due, emerging markets, companies, everything, that you can still get a short-lived, strong U.S. dollar. This is basically going perhaps to be its swan song. It is no mistake that we are surrounding Venezuela. It's no mistake that we are surrounding Iran. All right, which are also, these are proxy wars. You have to understand, these are proxy wars between the United States, maybe some of the Western European countries, against, of course, Venezuela and Iran, but then also Russia and China, and Turkey's probably somewhere in the middle as well. Okay? We've talked about those respective countries building up their gold reserves, perhaps looking to de-dollarize their trade system, meaning they're just going to say, okay, we're going to conduct trade with each other, this being Iran, Russia, China, okay, Turkey, maybe some others. We're going to continue to conduct trade with each other, but we're not going to do it in U.S. dollars. Maybe we'll do it in some currency. Maybe they'll end up backing it by gold because of their buildup of gold reserves. I don't know. This is all speculation, but I'm telling you something is cooking, something is brewing, and I don't like it. Because the whole thing that keeps the U.S. economy together at this juncture, and has been for quite a while, is the strength of the U.S. dollar and the fact that it is the world's global reserve currency. We talk about this at length in our book, The Cynic's Guide to Investing, the whole petrodollar system. That's right, petrodollar, petro as in oil. Okay? If the United States loses 30 to 40% of its energy sector, that's a big problem, ladies and gentlemen, big problem. It's a lot of jobs. It's a lot of investment. It's a lot of national security risk, perhaps. Big problems. Okay? Well, we got to go control more of some of the biggest reserves in the world. That's right, Venezuela. In fact, they do have the biggest oil reserves in the world. And Iran's not too far behind them. And Iran is very, very rich with natural gas as well. It's no mistake that we have these countries surrounded. It's no mistake that Juan Guaido, the man who declared himself El Presidente, down in Venezuela last year, the halls of Congress earlier this year, only a couple of months ago during the President's State of the Union address. This is not a coincidence, ladies and gentlemen. This man is not a Nobel Peace Prize winner. He's not a nuclear physicist. He didn't cure cancer. He was just there. For what reason? To send a message to those who are paying attention that the United States still wants to be heavily involved in interfering with another country's politics and where they're headed. Now, of course, nobody else can do that to us, but it's perfectly okay for us to go around other countries telling them what to do, who should be their president, yada, yada, yada. Free was never so expensive. Who's going to pay for all of these wars? Well, I guess it's going to be the Federal Reserve. They're just going to print money. Because Uncle Sam's broke. He's as broke as a joke. So is the state of Pennsylvania. So is Connecticut. So is Illinois. So is Michigan. So is California. The list goes on and on and on. There's only a handful of states in the Union who are somewhat solvent. And that's only for now. That's only for the time being. Because we don't know where the bottom is on this. We don't know how many more people are going to be unemployed. Texas has been booming for the past decade with this shale oil and everything and natural gas revolution. 30 to 40%, they go bust. Texas goes with it. Same thing with North Dakota. Same thing with Pennsylvania and a couple other states. Then you look at the pension problem. That's a story unto itself. We might have to do a whole segment, a whole week worth of discussions and podcasts on the pension crisis. How that's going to get squeezed. How it is getting squeezed. How it's been squeezed. And how those chickens are coming home to roost. How this is going to become another issue of contention. Another cause for protests and riots. Those who have pensions versus those who don't. Because those who don't have them are most undoubtedly going to be paying higher taxes to fund those pensions. How you think that's going to work? Not going to happen, Jack. Same thing with the student loan crisis. Those who paid theirs off and sacrificed, and those who just, maybe they were born at the right time, went to school at the quote-unquote right time, and now they're all going to be forgiven. How you think that's going to play over? Not too well. At least not with me, I can assure you that. And the list goes on and on and on. The other night we did that podcast and uploaded it, A Death by 1,000 Cuts. Have you put some thought into the sectors and the industries that you know intimately? That you're experts on? Have you thought about those questions? What are the behavioral changes going to be? Because it was a very good point that was made, and I cite him many times here. Peter Schiff, I follow him, on YouTube, on Twitter. Listen to him when I can if he gets the time to be on the financial media, not too often, that they have him on there because they don't like his analysis, because he's telling it like it is most of the time, and they just don't like it. He's not a buy boy, so, see ya. That's how it goes. You either play to the commercialization of Wall Street, and they'll continue to put you on, or you don't. That's how it works. But anyway, he put out an interesting tweet, I think it was yesterday or the other day. Very, very good point, in my opinion, in relation to the restaurant industry, which is what we were discussing as one of the examples in that podcast, A Death by 1,000 Cuts. And he talked about the marginal player. He talked about that additional restaurant that's going to remain open, perhaps, at the expense of all of this free money, right? All of this stimulus, all of this bailout, all of these government loans, grants, whatever you want to call them. Now, what would naturally happen is the restaurants who are not well managed, don't have cash flow, don't have savings, don't have a cushion, go out of business. Now, that might not be good, of course, for those employees, for that restaurateur, but, people go out of business all the time. Businesses shutter all the time. And there's no emergency bailout or stimulus for them. This is the natural ebb and flow of commerce, okay? Those who know how to run a business, who know how to manage money, should reap the rewards of staying in business and being able to pick up market share when those who are also in their business shutter their doors because they were not good businessmen or restaurateurs. Okay, you follow? So what Peter Schiff's point he is making here, he said, look, if the federal government comes in and bails these restaurants out and keeps them in competition, and if you have behavioral changes, meaning fewer people are going to order takeout, fewer people are going to actually go physically to these restaurants, what you are doing is you are now hurting those restaurants who are in a better position. So now they're going to suffer even more because they now have competition with those weaker restaurants as a result of them being bailed out. This is like creating a zombie restaurant, and that zombie is going to help kill other successful restaurants because they're still competing. You follow what I'm saying? These people, customers, you and me, we say, oh, well, I only got Joe's restaurant because, well, Joe must have been the good restaurateur. He had better cash flow. He had better money management, yada, yada, yada. Everybody, if you wanted to go to a restaurant, would have to go to Joe's. Okay? But now, because Joe got an emergency loan, and so did Julia, well, Julia can keep her restaurant open too. Julia wasn't good with money. Not a very good businesswoman. Her restaurant should have shuttered, but now she's going to stay in business. Joe did the right thing. He should reap the rewards of getting Julia's market share, but that's not going to happen now. So now, as a result of this, Joe's going to get fewer customers in an economy that has social behavioral changes because of the pandemic. At least for the short term, that's what I am imagining. So now Joe is also going to continue to suffer because of this. He would have picked up that extra market share, which maybe would have made him break even, keep himself afloat, whatever the case may be. You understand the point that Peter Schiff is making. I hope you understand what I am saying here, because that's how an economy is supposed to work. Those with good or better balance sheets are supposed to pick up the market share of those who had a poor balance sheet because they're no longer in business. That's how the economy is here. That's why you call it a correction. Because the resources will go to the correct people, the correct money managers, because they could weather the storm. That's how it's supposed to work. You keep everybody alive. You got zombie companies all over the place. We've had zombie companies all over the place to begin with. Now there's going to be even more. This is basically a theory of saying, all right, we got a couple rotten apples here. Let's throw them in a barrel full of fresh, good, healthy apples, because the good, fresh, healthy apples will somehow miraculously make those rotten apples good. It's not how it works, folks. What's going to happen is those rotten apples are going to make the whole barrel stink. That's what's going to happen. That's why I called it a death by 1,000 cuts, because this is going to happen one after the next. After the next, it's going to be a slow drip, one after the next. I even have some firsthand knowledge that some of these, there's a lot of banks out there, obviously, but there's a lot of banks that are not even adopting this stimulus. They don't want to be a party to it. They don't want to be a party to it. I know people who've called up their bank just to see if they could get some type of mortgage relief if they needed it. Nope, we're not doing that. We can do a forbearance, but there's going to be a penalty incurred, so the individual would have to pay fees on top of it, and the interest would accrue. So there is no point going down that road, at least with this one particular bank, and I have no doubt that is going to be common amongst many, many other banks across this country. So who's really getting relief here? And again, remember, the $1,200 is sit down and shut up money. That's what it is. Because you have to follow the money. You have to understand the mechanism as to where that money is going to go. A decade ago, they said, screw you, Jack. We're just going to go straight and bail out Wall Street. This time, they're saying, oh, well, if we say screw you, Jack, there might be pitchforks and, torches in the streets. We can't do that. We got to give these people something. Let's give them $1,200. That should be enough to keep them quiet for a little while. Maybe an extra $600 in a thing. Unemployment, okay, that should keep them tame for a little bit. We'll see how long we can carry this off, and then we'll give the trillions to Wall Street. We'll give the trillions to corporate America, which is exactly what they've done and continue to do. Again, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet is at $5.8 trillion. We'll get an update on that tomorrow, which I'm sure will be north of $6 trillion. I think I'm pretty safe with that analysis, that it will be north of $6 trillion. They are spending money like it is going out of style because it is. Because it is. Where's it all coming from? Who's paying for it? You and me. Free was never so expensive. Wait until the hyperinflation comes. I'm finally starting to hear in the news. Of course, we were well ahead of the curve on this one, which is typical. Starting to talk about it in the news. Hey, what's going to happen with all of the farmland? What's going to happen with all of these farmers? What's going to happen with all these crops? We can't get migrant workers in here. People aren't allowed to work. What's going to happen to all the food? It's going to rot. That's what's going to happen to it. It's going to rot. So what's going to happen to the price of food? Here comes your inflation. That's why I told you, get that $1,200, you better do something with it quick. Because it ain't going to go that far. It's not. And if you're a family and you need health insurance and you've lost your job, well, you've lost your benefits. Your premium might be $1,200. Your premium might be $2,400. So the money that you and your wife get, boom, straight just to health insurance, just to cover the premium. Then maybe you got a couple kids. Okay, maybe you get an extra $500, $1,000. Well, what's that going to get you? Is that going to cover your mortgage? Is that going to cover your rent, your utilities, your phone bill? What's it going to cover? For how long? Probably not that much. For not that long. Because unfortunately, we live in a country where, 30% of the country doesn't have, 40% of the country doesn't have $400 cash in the event of an emergency? Yeah, so how far do you think this money's going to go? And again, as I was about to say earlier, we're financial intermediaries. That's all we are. We're just the middleman. Here's your $1,200. Okay, go pay your rent. Okay, go pay your mortgage. Okay, go pay your car payment. Okay, go pay your credit card. Go pay something else. You're just the middleman. You're just a pass-through. That's all. Going to somebody else. Instead of giving it all directly to them from the Federal Reserve and from the federal government, well, we'll give it to you. We'll make it seem like you're getting something, and then you'll just go ahead and give it right back to who we're going to give it to begin with. It's a joke. It's a joke. You know how much this is going to cost? Watch. It'll start with food. We end up in war. It'll end up in your commodity prices. You couldn't try to do a worse job. You couldn't try. If you understand your economic history, if you understand truly the Great Depression, and there's a great book, America's Great Depression by Murray Rothbard, who's an Austrian economist. I highly suggest the book. To understand what the federal government did, what the Federal Reserve did, that led up to the Great Depression, that caused the Great Depression, and that prolonged it. The whole thing. Very well detailed, very great writer, easy to understand. The government, it's as if it's doing the same thing again in the 21st century. Only the names and the faces change, I guess. That's why I have been saying here that this could turn into the Greatest Depression. Because these idiots at the helm don't know what they're doing. Or they do, and they're doing exactly what they want. Either is completely unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. So much growth has been stolen from my generation and from generations yet to exist. It's immoral, it's unethical, it's un-American. The president doesn't say enough is enough. The Treasury Secretary doesn't say enough is enough. The economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, who used to be a free market capitalist, at least I thought he was when he was on CNBC, strong dollar, free market capitalism, let the markets work, completely abandoned. They must have dunked him in the head one too many times in the Potomac, and now he got the message. Get on board, Larry, or ship out. Well, now he's on board with corporate socialism. Interesting what that town does to people. How quickly. Democrats, no, hey. Because D.C., they're already talking about another bailout package of $250 billion for small and mid-sized businesses. Because the first rollout worked so fantastic, we got to give them more. Democrats, that's not enough. Never enough. $250 billion Not enough in addition to what was already thrown out the window. We got to make it $500 billion. That's going to be their argument. So here comes down the pike another $500 billion. Probably more. And we've still yet to see what they want to do with infrastructure, which, last time we talked about that. It's got a price tag of about $2.2 trillion. So, okay, there's another $2.5-3 trillion. On top of the $6 trillion. 2 from the government, 4 to the Federal Reserve. We're at $21 trillion economy by GDP here in the United States, about that. 20 trillion, let's say it. $6 trillion, that's almost a third of the economy right there over the course of a couple weeks. We're just going to make it up. We're just going to print it, and we're going to see what happens. This is what they do in Argentina. It's what they do in Turkey. It's what they do in Iran. It's what they do in Venezuela. It's what they do in Zimbabwe. It's what they do in banana republics. Anybody who stands up for this, thinks that this is reasonable, think that Donald Trump is a genius, thinks that Larry Kudlow, Peter Navarro, Mnuchin know what they're talking about, you need to have your head examined. You think Nancy Pelosi knows what she's talking about? Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, any other of these idiots, you think they know what they're talking about, you need your head examined. This is a financial coup d'etat. They have you wrapped around your fingers if you continue to support any of them. Just a good little boy, good little girl doing exactly what they want you to. Make believe there's two sides to this argument. I am asking for a peaceful revolution. The one way you could start this is to leave the Republican and Democratic Party. Become an independent, a libertarian, constitutionalist, Green Party, unaffiliated. I don't care. Leave them because they have left you a very, very long time ago. And it is right in your face. How you can't see it is beyond me. Maybe because the numbers are so incomprehensible. Maybe because it's a 24/7 news cycle. Misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, BS. One after the next. Can't get my head around it. Numbers too big. Well, let's see what happens. Not my field of expertise. I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not an economist. I don't know. Let's just trust the government. The government that's been screwing people over for generations. Yeah, let's trust them. That's good thinking. The sheep being led to slaughter. And I don't even know what's going to come next. When it comes to a police state, the surveillance state, some type of control with this whole pandemic. I have no idea. But it's Big Brother on steroids. It's 1984 on steroids. It's a surveillance state. People say, oh, well, that's stuff that happens in China. No, where do you think China's getting the ideas from? Us. China dreams that they could be the surveillance state like the United States. But our politicians say it's free market capitalism, so it must be. Our politicians quote from some of our founding fathers and founding documents, so it must still be a constitutional republic. Don't be so naive. They tell you what you want to hear. They tell you what you want to hear. They tell you it's a free lunch. They tell you it's going to be $1,200. It'll be more by the time this is all said and done. Because it's going to have to be. Because there's not going to be a V-shaped recovery. They don't want riots in the streets here in the United States, but they're going to come. Wait till the costs start going up. Wait till the money runs out. Wait till people start realizing behaviors have seriously changed. You know, what really gets this virus going is the fact, at least here in this country, is the underlying health issues, which we picked up on months ago, which is why I said this was going to be a problem in this country. Because if what they were saying was true, and of course it makes sense if you're sick already, if you already have an underlying health condition, catching some sort of virus is not going to do you any favors. Well, when you run through it and you talk about, well, if they're older, if they have diabetes, if they have cancer, if they have asthma, if they have other breathing problems, no, we don't have any of that. Obesity, no, not in this country. Not in the United States of America. No, not even close. We don't have any old people here. We don't have any obese people here. We don't have any people suffering from cancer. We don't have any people, diabetes, smoking, emphysema, COPD. None of that here. Of course, that's not the case. It's a significant portion of this country that is unhealthy, that has an underlying health condition. And this virus is not going to do anybody any favors. We don't know how much further this is going to go. Therapies, vaccines, who knows? Is it going to be coming back again in the fall, in the winter? Will all hell break loose again? Everything need to be shut down, stay in your house? What are they going to roll out next time? Tanks going to be coming down the streets, Humvees, curfews, lockdowns. What's next? Free was never so expensive. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Kapital News. I am Alex Kreitis. Godspeed.